The following is a paid program by the Whitley Law Firm. Welcome to Attorneys on Call, the program that gives you free legal information from the Whitley Law Firm. Now, here's your host, Drew Smith.
Well, hi again, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us today for this edition of Attorneys on Call. You may have heard the term wrongful death, but what does that really mean here in the state of North Carolina? In studio with me, Bob Whitley and Ben Whitley from the Whitley Law Firm. And gentlemen, I know this is the most difficult thing that you do as representing people around the state of North Carolina, the wrongful death claims. Bob, can you kind of just fill us in initially, and what does that mean? What's the definition of that?
Well, we all hear the term negligence, which is the basis of the typical automobile injury, personal injury claim. That is, somebody's negligence has resulted in someone being injured.
Sure.
And of course, the very worst injury that you could have would be that which is so serious that you die from that injury, either right at the scene or within a period of time thereafter. And Drew, they're difficult for us because we're human beings.
Sure.
And we have families and children, and I have grandchildren. And when you hear these heart-wrenching stories, I always tell my clients that I am a family person, but I've now got to talk to you, Mr. Client, just like this is a business, because they need information, they need to make decisions, but it's still special to me. I probably don't hold hands any more than I do when I'm handling a wrongful death, because the whole family is affected by it. It's an unexpected death. And I want to talk about some of the cases that I've been involved with and some of the wonderful families that I've met because of that. And I guess it's a word of caution to those that are listening, because if you've recently gone through this yourself, you may not want to hear this part of it, because the last thing in the world I would want to ever do is unintentionally cause grief to someone unnecessarily. But, you know, you seek in a wrongful death claim, just like you do in a personal injury claim, you seek money, damages, but it's never about the money. You know, one of my favorite imaginary jury arguments is in a death claim to tell that jury, if we could really do magic, that door of the courtroom would open and this decedent, whether it's a child or whoever the case is about, walks in. And we would turn to that jury and say, and now we don't want one penny of money. We want to pack up our briefcase and we want to go home.
Right.
But that just isn't going to happen in the real world. And Drew, it's about a sense of justice and responsibility. If a family has lost someone, they kind of want to know that if whoever did cause this is held responsible. Not necessarily serving a long time in jail, but just is held responsible so that their insurance company will have to acknowledge that responsibility, and that's by way of money. And the other is that sense of justice. But as I have mentioned on an earlier show, I've kind of learned in my senior years that it's a desire to get answers. They want to know what happened. Some of them want to know, what was it like for my loved one at the end? I had a dad in a bad wreck case on the highway where he was trying to get his vehicle off the road and was struck by another vehicle. That dad wanted me to ask the driver, was his son looking at him, did he know what was going to happen to him?
Man.
Or did he have his back to the car approaching and didn't know?
Wow.
And that's the kind of answers they want. And I've kind of learned that there's not a right or wrong answer. And it could be very hard for them to accept that, but they nevertheless want the truth. Some years ago, a wonderful young man was a student at State University and was in an apartment fire. He had worked that night, had gone to bed early, and his friends were downstairs, and somebody left a cigarette on a sofa, and the apartment house pretty much burned down, and he was killed. And this was an outstanding young man, wonderful family. And I well remember his mom's story about the sheriff coming to visit her to tell her that there'd been a fire. And I think he used the word dormitory. And I remember her saying, well, that's not him, because he wasn't in a dormitory.
Right.
Drew, there's a
Right.
sense of denial early on, too.
Okay.
Even I think when we have natural deaths in my house. I remember when my mom died, she was my favorite fan, and there were times when I just felt like I wanted to pick the phone up and call her. And I think that happens even more so when there's an unexpected death. And his dad, that student's dad, wanted to know about how he died. Did he pass out from smoke inhalation, or did he burn in the fire? And I remember telling him, I'm not sure you want to know those answers, but he did.
He wanted to know all that.
Yes, he wanted to know. And that's what people really want to know, or a lot of people want to know. Sometimes it's obvious, but in both of these cases, these families wanted to know. And you have the worst cases, and you meet some of the best families. There's a family in Oxford that had a young 16-year-old daughter who worked. She was respected in the schools, was the class comedian, and she was killed drastically as a backseat passenger in the family car as they were waiting to turn into their driveway on a Wednesday night after church services.
Oh, man.
And she died holding hands with her mom.
Oh.
And when you hear those stories, they're good. But these people are much stronger than I was about dealing with it. And she was a wonderful girl. I'll never forget, the family received a card, a sympathy card, from someone who identified themselves, said, but you don't know me, but I was a customer where your daughter worked. And I always got in line at her cash register because she made me smile. And she was so wonderful. And y'all did a great job raising her. And I think you should know that. So they're the kind of stories you hear. Recent tragic case that we're involved in deals with the death of a 2-year-old who was properly fastened to a seat, a toddler seat in the back seat of a vehicle.
Okay.
And it was kind of a freak T-bone type accident where there was so much intrusion into their vehicle that while it didn't appear immediately that child was seriously injured, that toddler, he suffered extensive internal injuries and within a period of 5 to 6 hours passed away.
Oh, man.
From internal bleeding. A lot of his internal organs had been lacerated and were in one way described as exploding.
Oh,
and that mom wanted to know, what had killed the little baby, from the medical standpoint. She knew the wreck that the child had sustained trauma in the wreck. But Drew, I always derive strength from these people because they're stronger at dealing with it than I am sometimes as their attorney. And our job is to tell their story, is to make that deceased person by old photographs and films and whatever way we can come alive. I'll never forget one of my very early cases when I was a young lawyer, was the death of a 16-year-old who was killed coming back from the beach. And I remember well her mom on the witness stand, and I asked her to tell us about her daughter. And we had a collage of pictures when she was a cheerleader, when she got her driver's license, and all these things growing up, her kindergarten pictures. And I'll never forget her mom up there on that witness stand, smiling and enjoying telling that jury about her little girl's life. And equally as compelling was her dad's testimony, or lack thereof. He couldn't talk. I got his name out, and I asked him to tell the jury, and he simply could not talk. And so they're kind of the stories we run into, and the wonderful families. And that last case I was telling you about, that mom became a spokesperson for our Arrive Alive program because there was alcohol involved in the wreck that took her daughter's life. And again, a sense of responsibility is what they want, and they want justice in whatever form, and they want information about what really happened to their loved one.
It's an amazing. Thank you for sharing that, Bob. It really is impactful for many of us to hear that. And once again, if you want more information of what you just heard, Bob Whitley does have a DVD, a video available. What you need to know about wrongful death claims in the state of North Carolina. You can get that by going to the website, whitleylawfirm.com. You can get that by calling the 800 number. We do have operators standing by live right now, and you can order that DVD. We do want to mention that coming up in the program, a very important consumer safety alert. You need to know about this because it affects many of us. Once again, a consumer safety alert we're going to be talking about next on Attorneys on Call.
Getting into a serious accident wasn't part of your plan, so now you need a new plan, one that calls for the right action right now. At Whitley Law Firm, we fight hard to get the money you need to protect everything you've worked so hard for, and we have the experience and resources to make it happen.
If you've been injured, call the Whitley Law Firm now. It's free. 800-785-5000. Get the Whitley advantage.
Insurance. It's supposed to help you feel protected. But you've been in an accident, and the insurance company is playing games. Now how are you feeling? At Whitley Law Firm, we can help you get the money that you need to protect your family and your future.
If you've been injured, call the Whitley Law Firm now. It's free. 800-785-5000. Get the Whitley advantage.
And welcome back to Attorneys on Call. We have two very important consumer safety alerts to talk about now in the program. And Bob and Ben Whitley with us, of course. And Ben, the first safety recall we're going to talk about involves airbags that could be in your vehicle, right?
Right, and a lot of folks have heard about it on the news. It's been going on for a little bit of time now, but there still are deaths occurring, and we're indicating that a lot of these airbags they're finding them in more and more vehicles, and they're not getting replaced as they should. But it's the Takata airbag that we've heard about on the news, and essentially what is going on is that in over 19 different car manufacturers, all the way from Ford to BMW and everything in between, could be affected by this.
Okay.
Takata is a foreign parts manufacturer that builds and manufactures the airbag that is found on 19 different car brands. And there's been a safety recall as it relates to these airbags, and that the airbags are deploying too early or deploying with shrapnel or just simply not working and doing their job to protect folks that have been in car accidents.
Okay.
Some of the injuries that we hear about on the news is shrapnel, items coming into people's faces. Over 12 people have actually been killed by this, others injured. Or some of the types of airbag cases that we see are failure to deploy type cases, where somebody is in an accident and the airbag does not go off, and then you have a claim against the manufacturer. Those types of cases may or may not be a Takata, and I'll explain the difference. But one of the resources that I want to point people toward right now is on your screen, you're going to see the website of a government entity, the National Highway Transportation Safety Association.gov, that you can go onto that website and plug in your VIN number. And your VIN number, every vehicle in the country has a specific number attached to it. It's your VIN number. Plug it into this website, and it'll tell you whether or not your vehicle is part of this Takata recall. And for that matter, part of any recall, safety recall, that you may need to be aware of. I would encourage folks that have done that or may have gotten a letter from the manufacturer or their dealership indicating that their vehicle may be subject to this recall and to schedule a time to come in, is to immediately try to get that taken care of.
Right.
And if you can't get it immediately taken care of, to write a letter back to either the dealership or to the manufacturer that you were trying to, or something, because in this recent death that happened last month, And Honda is already arguing, well, we sent them notices of this recall, and the family is saying that they didn't get those notices.
Okay.
Okay. So I would document everything. I would get in touch with an attorney if there's been an injury. Now, just because you have a recalled car does not mean you have a case.
Okay.
Okay. It does not mean that your airbag is just going to randomly fail. It just means that there is a potential of a problem out there, and I would encourage folks to get it checked out.
Let's take a look at that website one more time if we could, because I want to make sure that people write this down. And so if you do have a pen and paper handy, I would suggest grabbing that and writing this down. Of course, we do have operators live taking calls, as we said. However, this is the website, nhtsa.gov. And so once again, Ben, you get your VIN number.
Right.
You put that in. You go to this website, you put that in. And so let's say it could be an American-made car, it's a foreign-made car, it doesn't matter. But you put your VIN number in, and you'll know if I have one of those Takata airbags in my car.
Exactly. And this website, I looked at it this morning just to kind of to learn and navigate. It's a very simple website. It actually tells you how to find your VIN if you can't find it. It's usually on the inside the door or on the front left part of the windshield is where it has to be. And it's a rather long, complicated number with both letters and numbers, and that's how you know that you have your VIN. Plug it into that website. You're going to find out whether or not you've got the Takata airbag or any other safety recalls. And I would also encourage folks, if you know if you yourself or a family member has been in an accident and the airbag has failed to deploy or has partially deployed and has caused an injury, that to reach out to us for a free consultation. To give you an example of the type of case, we're representing a young lady who had a Jeep Wrangler, and she was in a serious car accident. It was a single car accident, okay?
Okay.
And she hit a pole at a high rate of speed, and it should have triggered the airbag. And the airbag partially deployed, but she hit her head on the steering wheel,
Okay.
And it's caused her to have a head injury.
Okay.
So the key thing to remember about airbag cases is that if it's a situation where it's a failure to deploy type case or partially deploy, the injury has to be such that it would have been it would not have been of a bad injury had it not deployed, if you're following me.
Right.
So
right.
if you're in a car accident and you break your leg, well, whether or not the airbag went off or
Sure.
not is not relevant.
Sure.
The injury has to be connected to the failure of that airbag to go off.
So in that woman's case, if the airbag had deployed correctly, she wouldn't have hit her head on the steering
She
wheel.
she would have had a lesser of an injury. We'll have to have experts to prove that, but
Okay.
that's the theory, that's the case that we have in pursuing that. In the other Takata cases that we've talked a little bit about in the safety recall, and what we've seen nationally is that people have actually been injured by exploding airbags. It sounds terrible.
It does.
So what they're thinking the cause is the little pellets or accelerants that are used to cause the explosion, because it's a small explosion, but it's what causes the airbag to blast out, have allowed water or other contaminants to seep in, and over time they're just failing or they're going off without the sensor telling them to go off. So different various failures involved with that. And they've already drilled down to the issue, and the National Department of Transportation has done everything through their national highway to try to notify consumers. But the consumers, you talk to people that say they may have gotten that safety recall notice and I can't get into my dealership, or they're stalling. Don't stall. This is an important, and in some situations, a life or death situation.
Tell us once again where people can go, that website, where they can, and how they can find out if their car is involved.
Sure. So on the screen right now, it is nhtsa.gov. That is a free website by the government, Department of Transportation,
Okay.
where they can look up their VIN number and determine whether or not their vehicle is subject to this recall.
Okay. We're going to talk about another safety consumer recall as well, and this has to do with a hernia mesh, right? So this
Right.
is a mesh that the doctors use when someone has a hernia surgery, and they implant this in the person, but it can cause problems.
It can, and this is a very common surgery, and this is something that men and women have to have, and there have been some great breakthroughs in the ways that these hernias can be repaired through surgical mesh. But a particular brand, the Philo Mesh, has shown a higher failure rate, and when it's failing, The surgery is causing complications. Folks are having bleeding, pain, other complications that are sending them back to the doctor. And I just want to be clear, not to scare everyone, because this is something that's common. These surgeries are common. What we are seeing are complications where someone has a rupture or some issue that's sending them back to the doctor. Okay, that's the warning sign. And to check with your doctor to see whether or not the filo-mesh was used, as that was the safety information that the FDA has sent out and is warning folks. And after everything checks out with your doctor and you've consulted with your doctor, I would encourage to call us. We can do a free consultation over the phone to talk about your individual case. We can do it online. We have operators standing by now. If you want to call and leave your contact information, we will reach out back to you. And same for the airbag. You know, if you've just got questions, if this has generated some concern and questions, and you just say, hey, I want to go back to what he said, or can I talk to him? You know, please, it's a free call.
Okay, so that's interesting because, as you said, these hernia surgeries are very common. In fact, a family member of mine had one just recently.
Right.
And so the concern is, or what the suggestion would be, is just call your doctor. Find out if this particular mesh was used in my surgery, right?
That's exactly right. And because what we see is a type of, it's a polypropylene type mesh that's often used for surgical repairs. Find out if this was used. It's in your medical records, and at least that can give you some peace of mind to know that you're covered.
Okay. Once again, at any time, you can call the 800 number on your screen. You can go to whitleylawfirm.com, and you can request one of the very free DVDs there to get more information as well. We're going to be back with our final segment of Attorneys on Call right after this.
You, your family, your income. What do they mean to you after an accident? You have a family to take care of and a home you're struggling to keep. At Whitley Law Firm, we get it. You need to protect everything that matters to you. Our team of lawyers can help.
If you've been injured, call the Whitley Law Firm now. It's free. 800-785-5000. Get the Whitley advantage.
When I had my motorcycle accident, obviously the first thing I was thinking of was my health. Am I going to be okay? There are also things that you have to think of afterwards, the expenses that come with that, the medical expenses and so forth. Knowing that the Whitley Law Firm was there for me relieved all of that. It relieved that from my family. All we had to focus on was ourselves getting better after the accident. The Whitley Law Firm was there to take care of me, and I'm very appreciative.
If you've been injured, call the Whitley Law Firm now. Get the Whitley advantage.
And welcome back to Attorneys on Call. If you had to hire an attorney, what questions would you ask and where would you start? Well, Bob, we're going to talk a little bit about that and how it's so important for people to select the right attorney.
And Drew, I think a lot of the public or people that get in wrecks are kind of faced with that. They'll get different advice from their family members, from friends, and who are, you know, trying to do the right thing.
Sure.
And they'll start getting a pile of letters in the mailbox. And gosh, now I think you get big pamphlets and videos and different things in the mail from different law firms soliciting your business. So where do you start and what do you do? I think that you, first of all, in today's world, it's a little bit easier because you can find out more about attorneys and their law firms through the internet.
Sure.
So one thing would be to go to the website of someone who's been recommended. And you certainly will hear from, I don't know how many lawyers during the course of a day watching television with the 30-second ads.
Right.
And you'll hear these kind of tempting things like a free case evaluation or call us and we can talk to you about what your case is worth. And even the Whitley Law Firm in the past had run similar ads. And I think about it, you know, I think it's kind of a gimmick. There is no way in the world that you can, on the phone in a short telephone conversation or without knowing a whole lot more, tell anybody what their case is worth. Because there's so much to that question. You know, how long they're going to suffer or have suffered, the permanency of their injuries, the extent of their pain, did they take pain medicine, all those kind of things. So And you hear lawyers talk about aggressively, hammering the insurance companies and all of that. And there are a lot of good lawyers that run those kinds of ads. But I think one of the things that I believe is most important, and this may come from being an older lawyer, is experience. There is no substitute for that. There are not many things that I have not run up against in my 40 plus years as a lawyer and as a trial lawyer. So I think experience is important. I'm not the only one with enough and a lot of good experience. One other thing is being able to talk to the lawyer. If you want to meet a lawyer and they send a, quote, investigator or a paralegal or whoever they send other than a lawyer, then that may not be a good sign. It could be. But I think it's important that when you're hiring a lawyer, you really look into the accessibility you're going to have to the lawyer, because the lawyer is going to be your advocate.
Sure.
And the only way we can be your advocate, that is, we are your mouthpiece, is to know as much as we can about you. And there's no substitute for talking to somebody, meeting them. And in serious cases, I like to go to their homes. And you can learn more about your clients that way. You can learn more about how the injury has affected your life. So they're just some of the things. I think you've got to be comfortable with the lawyer. And if you're a little standoffish, then that lawyer may not work for you, because you're going to have to share very personal information. You're going to have confidence in that lawyer. And I think a lot of that is based on the experience and the record of the lawyer, whether they try cases and have handled cases like yours in the past. So they are some of the main things that I would look for if I were advising someone about what to consider when you're hiring a lawyer. I must say, though, since we're talking about that, there's nothing I take any more seriously than a client's decision to hire our law firm, because that means that of all the law firms out there, they have made the choice to hire us, and we don't take that lightly. That is a very serious decision that the client has made, and we're going to not let them down. We want to make them not only refer us business to people they know, but to become a raving fan of our law firm. And the only way you can do that is you treat that client with respect and dignity, and you work as hard as you possibly can for the best outcome you can for that client. And then that will lead to other clients.
And that's a great way to wrap it up. And once again, call the 800 number, go to whitleylawfirm.com. You can request one of these free DVDs. They are free. You'll get a lot of great information. That's a great place to start. We thank you so much for joining us today for this edition of Attorneys on Call. We'll see you next time right here.